So what we're going to be working with today is we're going to be rolling out a slab I'm going to be working with red clay, but chances are you have white clay at home. It doesn't matter the color of clay. I'm just going to roll out a slab and I'm going to show you the basics into how to make a cylinder cup or a cylinder with a bottom that you can then use to turn into sculpture or some other piece. You can use it for pieces or whatever it is that you might like to use it for. The basic tools that we're going to need for this are going to be your wire cutter, obviously your clay, one of your ribs, the rolling pin, two slats that are of equal thickness, your clay knife. I like to have a pencil on hand, and then some water with a sponge. Now you might see me use a couple of things that aren't exactly like the materials or tools that you have at home, but that's fine because you can just improvise and you can try and find things that would work just the same. For example, something like this serrated rib, this rib with little teeth on the top of it there. That could be imitated with a fork, or even if you had like an old credit card that you have access to that's going to be thrown away, or any kind of hard plastic, you just go ahead in there with scissors and cut those little teeth out. Fork works just fine, but for my sake, I'm going to be using the serrated rib. The other thing that you're going to need is a paper cup. Now the reason we're using this paper cup is because if we're making a cylinder and we want it to be something that mimics this, we would simply take that paper cup, cut it, and open it up, and we now have ourselves a template. So this template, if we were to cut this out, as you will soon see, once we cut this template, we'll be able to pick it up and reassemble it in the same fashion as this cup. Now, keeping in mind that clay shrinks, this cup, which is a 12-ounce cup, not quite sure, I think it's a 12-ounce cup, will be a little bit smaller. So I'll show you how to make it a little bit larger when we draw it out in our slab, or you can also just get a bigger cup. So these are the items you're going to need. You're also going to need a sponge and a little bit of water. I have some slip pre-made, and that should do it for this demo. First thing that you're going to want to do is take your wire tool and cut off about 2 inches of clay. And once you've taken that 2 inches of clay off, you would then take this slab, get out your ruler, your slats and your rolling pin, not a ruler pin. Place those on the side like this, and then slowly but surely start to wedge this slab out back and forth. You can throw it on the ground, or you can actually throw it on your wear bench, which will help stretch this out. And then you're just gonna roll it to the thickness of these slats. But for sake of time, I've already gone ahead and done that. And I have this slab here that's been pre-made. And I will take this slab, lay it out like so, and I will take my template. Now, I don't want to put this template right in the middle because that's going to limit to how much clay I have on either side, or if I'm going to do a bottom or a top, I won't have access, or I'll lose clay that I could potentially use to make 2 or 3 of these. So what I'll do is I'll take a flat edge and put it against the flat edge of my slab, and then I'm going to take my dull pencil and just give it a nice, very easy imprint of this cup into the clay. Now, this template right here will give me something exactly the same size as this cup. If I wanted to make it a little bit bigger, I could just, mark about a 1/2 inch off of each side, and then go ahead and give myself that arc just the same. Mark a 1/2 inch off the side here and there. Draw this line, and then do the same thing over here. So that's how I would make it a little bit bigger. You can also take this template, put it on a piece of paper, make it larger, and then cut it out as you see fit. I will then take my knife, my pottery knife, and very carefully go along my template lines. This slab is a little bit leather hard. I've let it set up for a little while. So if you notice that while you're working with yours that it seems to be quite floppy and difficult to handle, just let it set up for 25-30 minutes. And once you've let it set up, you'll be good to go. So there you go. I've cut out my template. I have myself what will be my cup. And you notice maybe I let this set up a little bit too much, and I could just spray it with some water. But you will notice that this slab is about maybe a little bit more than 1/4 of an inch. So the after I build this cup, it doesn't have the same thinness as this cup, so I'm gonna lose a little bit more of my water or my capacity to this cup. So I might wanna make things a little bit bigger. But for the sake of things now, I'm just gonna use this as my starting point. I'm gonna take this slab, put it off to the side. Let's actually move this back here. And what I'm gonna do with my template off to the side is I will then flatten this back out, and I'm going to bevel these edges. And what that means is I'm going to cut at a certain degree to the clay. Let's pretend we're looking at a cross section of the clay. And this is the cross section here. What I want to do is I want to cut this at an angle so that this piece that I'm going to join it with also has that angle cut. And then it gives me a little bit more surface for these two pieces to connect and join to than had they been just like a butt joint where the two ends just come up together. So what I'll do to accomplish that is very carefully, this takes a little bit of practice, but I'll just very carefully come through here with the edge of my knife, make my little bevel. It's always easier to take more off than it is to put some back on, kind of like a haircut. So take this pretty slow, get that nice beveled edge, and then this is going to join here, so I need to make this the opposite side. So I can flip that over and do the same thing over here. So that should give me the beveled edge that I need to join these two together. The next thing that I'm gonna do, I will use my serrated rib here to join these because this is leather hard. I wanna make sure that there is enough tooth to each clay, each side of this clay to join together. If this clay were a little bit more wet, I wouldn't need to score and slip it so much, but for the sake of the condition of this clay, I am going to score and slip it. And I'll take my sponge that's been sitting in slip water and just give it a very light dousing of water on that side and a little bit on this side. Now, that those two have been wetted, I will bring this in on itself. And again, this slab is a little stiff because it's been setting up. So I'm just gonna take some time to coax this into a circle. If you're working with a slab that is a little bit less set up, you will not have this issue. I bring this around. I'm getting a little bit of cracking on the outside of this slab. I'm just gonna take a little bit of the water from my bucket here and just kind of wet the outside of this just to help keep it from cracking more than it's going to. I probably should have done this with a little bit wetter of a slab, but here we are nonetheless. I'm going to go ahead and pinch this together. I'm going to join that here, and then I'm going to use my finger or a tool to really blend these two pieces together. You can see if you just let it sit, that the tension will start to pull the slab back apart. So what I want to do is really force these two together. It doesn't hurt to maybe add a little bit more water now that they're partially joined. So I can actually take a little bit of water from this slip bucket very gently, very little bit of water, and just kind of run that on that seam and allow that to soak in a little bit. And that should help it join together. And we can really try to make this seam invisible. S-E-A-M. If we just very gently bring it together. Now you'll notice that the outside of my slab has a little bit of texture. I just kind of left that in there from the surface that I was using on my rolling pin. So if you want to do a texture, that's fine. Doing it while you roll is a good idea. The only thing is that while you work this clay together, you're gonna lose that texture on the seam. So how do you resolve that? One way that you can resolve it is once it's set up and once you have it all clean and ready to go, as long as your clay is still leather hard, you can run it back along that surface again. And running it back along that surface again will give you that illusion that there is no seam. So while I am paying attention to the outside, I also wanna make sure that the inside here has enough blending that it brings that clay together. I don't want it just to remain a solid stripe down the inside. So what I can do, one of the nice things about this tool is that it has, where are we? It has a rounded end. I can take that rounded end and just kind of bring that up that seam, and that really helps compress the clay on the inside. Like that, you can see that. And then I can take some wet clay here and just kind of use my finger or a tool to help smooth that out. Maybe even put a coil in there to help make that seam a little less visible. But for the sake of things, I'm just gonna leave it as is for now. I've compressed this very securely. I feel comfortable with how well that's joined together. So the next step is going to be, of course, giving this a bottom. Now, if I were making a cup, I obviously would want the bottom to be the smaller side. If I were making this into, say, a volcano, maybe this side. If I were making this into a sculpture, I could put an end cap on both, or I could put an end cap on both and put a hole in it to make some kind of a vessel or a vase for flowers. The nice thing about this process is it really opens up the doors to a lot of variation. So you can use this to make pretty much anything. But for my sake, I'm gonna make a little cup with it. I'll take my slab, get this nice and round. I'll put this down on top of my slab. I will go ahead and give myself a little bit of room as I use my pencil to sketch this out. And I will cut this off. First giving myself plenty of room, and then going back in and being a little bit more precise. Cut the corners off first, maybe. Now the tricky part about this, especially when you start to get to bigger cups, is that it's gonna be harder and harder to reach down in there and make a really nice, clean seam. So what I like to do is I like to make sure that the bottom is nice and wet. Get this clay, a little bit of slop on there, a little bit of slip. Doesn't have to be a ton, but I like to set that up and let that water soak in for a minute while I prep the bottom. And I'll do the same thing here with the bottom. Get that nice and wet. And then very lightly with my serrated tool, I'll go around on just the outside and really scrape that up. All right, so the top should be nice and wet because I just added some water. And then I can go in with my serration tool, my serrated rib, and sort of open this up, right? Now that it's opened up, I can come back in, take a little bit of water. And again, you see how those little lines just accept that slip really nicely and dissipate throughout the bottom of this, what will be the bottom of this cup. So now I feel comfortable with that, has enough slip and enough water to it that it will accept this top piece. I will then do something similar to the top, put a little serrated rib on top of here. A little bit of slip goes a long way on a piece of leather hard clay. And there we go, got that nice and wet. And then I'm just gonna very carefully place that on top. I'm gonna push it down and give it a little bit of a wiggle. Don't wanna push so hard that I'll distort the clay, but I'm just gonna give it a little bit of a wiggle. And that should do it as far as giving this clay bottom a place to live. Now, I obviously, well, not obviously, but I don't want that edge on the end. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna push up on the outside just a little bit. And if you look closely, you'll see that kind of squirts some of the clay slip up and really helps join these two pieces of clay together. Maybe you can see that, but I'll just gently work my hand around it. Or you can put it on the table and just rock it around like this. This also helps. Gives it a nice little lift at the bottom. And if you notice on the inside, I'm not sure if there's enough light, but you can see that there's a pretty clean bottom to this. It doesn't look very messy as far as having too much slip showing. Then once that sets up, I can just take my knife tool and very easily, very gently, light fingers here, just kind of trim this off. Kind of like I was peeling an apple. Take some time and patience to get this nice and clean. Once I get to this point, feeling pretty good about how it looks. I'm gonna take this, roll it out again. I don't need to worry too much about these little sharp edges. I'm gonna solve that problem here momentarily with a sponge. Some of the bigger ones I can kind of trim down a little. But I like how that looks. And now with this seam that I'm missing here, I'm gonna take the tool that I made this slab with and just kind of run it over top of it just to see if I can redeem myself with that pattern so that it doesn't look so obvious. And as you see there, as I work the seam, I can get more and more of this to look exactly like I need it to look. So I'm just rolling this over. I know you can't see this right now, but that helps disguise that seam a little bit. I'll keep working with it, and at the end it should be nice and clean. Once it's done, I have my cup here. I'll take my stamp, and I'm gonna go ahead and just place my stamp on the bottom. There we go, there's my stamp on the bottom. I'll let this set up, and voila, I have a slab cylinder that very much resembles the Starbucks cup size. Again, if you want to make this bigger or smaller, manipulate the template a little bit. Once this sets up, I'm just run some slip over the top because I'm getting some cracking from this being a little bit of a too dry of a slab. And I'll run my sponge along the edge here. I'll clean up some of those hard edges. And maybe run this on the work surface a little bit too to help clean that up. As that sets up, I can go back in and continue manipulating it. But there we go. Slab cup. Now I could also then take this if I wanted to. I could put another end on it on here. Then I would have a closed vessel, or it's not a vessel, I would have a closed shape. I can use that to build on things. Or I can make two of these and then make two clay ones and put them together, and then I have a sculptural object. So the nice thing about working with a template, especially one that's so ready-made or ready available, is that you can make pretty much anything with it. And there we go, slab cylinder.